Hi there, I'm Mitchell from Brainfart Studio. Did you know you can completely automate the build process in Unity and send your game directly to your itch.io page? This is incredibly useful for game jams where you may be working with artists or composers who want to see their work in the game as quickly as possible. Imagine dropping in their art and allowing them to see their change in like 10 minutes without you having to wait for the build. Today, I'm going to show you how to set up continuous integration and continuous deployment, or CI/CD, between Unity, GitHub, and itch.io. With this, you no longer have to manually build your projects in Unity. They're built automatically every time you make changes and push to GitHub. Then the build is sent to itch.io without you having to do anything. It saves a ton of time, especially if you're working on a team, like in a game jam. Now, fair warning, this is a long and somewhat complicated process, but it's hands down worth it in my personal experience. Be patient and take the time to learn what's really happening. This tutorial does assume you have at least a basic understanding of Git and GitHub, but if you don't, that's okay too. I'll still be walking you through it step by step. Let's get started. So, the first step in setting up CI CD for your Unity project is, of course, having a Unity project. But we'll need to configure it in a certain way for the automation side of things later. Go ahead and open up your Unity project or create a new one if you need to. And here you can see I've got an empty project already. We're going to want to go to our build settings, and we can do that by clicking File and Build Settings. And on this panel that comes up, you can see that PC, Mac, and Linux is currently selected. That's the Unity default. But if we are going to want to deploy to itch.io, we're going to want to switch it to WebGL. So go ahead and click that and hit Switch Platform. And this can take a little while, sometimes about 2 or 3 minutes. So we're going to wait here, and I'll be back in just a minute. After about 2 or 3 minutes, you'll see that dialog box go away, and you'll see this little icon right here by our WebGL showing that that is now our current platform. You'll also see that Switch platform is no longer down here. We now see build and run. Now, we're not going to want to do those this time. We're going to come over here and click player settings. That's going to bring open our project settings, and specifically, it's going to go to the player tab. That's what we want. You're going to want to make sure that we have this panel selected specifically for the WebGL settings. And down here, we have a couple different things that we're going to adjust. First, our compression format. We're going to go ahead and adjust that to gzip. And then on decompression fallback, we want to make sure that that is enabled. Now, you can adjust these settings later, but I really only recommend doing so if you know what they do and you know how to properly adjust the YAML files that we'll be creating later on in this tutorial. Now we're going to head over into our web browser and head to github.com. And if you don't already have a GitHub account, you will need to go ahead and set one up here. But if you do, go ahead and log in. And once you are logged in, you'll see this green new button up in the corner. Go ahead and click that. This is where it will allow you to create a new repository. And again, if you aren't familiar with Git or GitHub, that's okay. Just follow along for now. Here in the repository name is where we're going to add the name of your project. In this case, I'm just going to use CI/CD demo. All the other fields are completely optional. Personally, I do recommend you add a README file as well as a git ignore using the Unity template. Now, you don't have to do this, it's just personal preference. And if you don't know what that means, just leave those blank for now. Public and private is going to be whether or not you want other people to be able to see your code. Public, anyone can see. Private, only you and the people who submit code to it will be able to see. So, completely up to you. Down here, it does have what your default branch will be called. In this case, mine is set to main. Go ahead and make note of that because we will be using it a little bit later on. Whenever you're ready, click Create Repository. On the page that comes up, go ahead and click this green code button. This is what's going to show you the URL for your GitHub repository. Go ahead and click this little button here, and it will copy that URL over to your clipboard. We're going to need that in just a minute. Go ahead and close your web browser. You can leave that page up. We will be coming back to it. And if you're on Windows, you'll want to bring up a command prompt. And if you're on Mac, a terminal window. So from your start bar, go ahead and type CMD to bring that window up. And you're going to want to navigate to the root of your Unity project. And if you aren't familiar with command prompt, you can type CD, which is short for change directory, and then you can drag the file path from Windows Explorer directly into that command prompt. So here's my CI/CD project. Let me get that on the right screen. So right here, you can either copy the address as text, or you can go ahead and just pull it right there into it. You can see that copied over. And once you hit enter, we are now in that directory. Now, there's 4 things we're going to want to do here, one line at a time. First, we're going to want to initialize a new repository with git space init, and that's short for initialization. Hit enter, and you can see that it initialized an empty Git repository. The second thing we're going to want to do is to set the origin to that GitHub repository that we just created. So type in git remote add origin, and then we're going to want to paste that URL. And I did copy here, so I'm going to have to go back over to our web browser real quick, copy that a second time, and paste it in there. Oop, I missed a space after origin. Okay, so that origin has now been added. The third thing we want to do is switch over to that default branch. A moment ago, I had you make note of what it was, and for me, that was main. So we're going to do git space checkout, and then a little -b for branch, and then whatever the name of that branch was. And for me, again, that was main. You'll need to put whatever was in that box for you. You can see I switched to the new branch main. You'll see it switched to yours if it was successful. And then finally, we want to pull the README and gitignore files from GitHub down to our Unity project on our computer. And the way we do that is with git pull origin, and then whatever that branch name was. So again, for me, that's main. Okay, you can see a little bit of information there. We're not going to worry about what that says, but if I go back over to my project, you see I now have that README file as well as the gitignore. Next, we're going to want to get your Unity license number. This is going to be used to automate the build process a little bit later on. And unfortunately, there's not an easy way to do this, at least not to my knowledge. But the good news is you only have to do it one time. Once you have the license file, you can just reuse it for all future projects. And this is the longest part of the tutorial, so kind of bear with me. First, we're going to need to create a GitHub action to get the Unity activation file, or the .afl. Then we'll use that file to request the license number directly from Unity. In the description of the video, I'm going to have a link to a zip file. Download that file and unzip it into your project's directory. Now, I've got mine on the desktop already, so I'm going to extract here and then move it into my project's directory. Now, inside this folder is going to be another folder called workflows. GitHub is going to require that folder be there. And inside that are going to be 2 files, activation.yaml and template.yaml. And now, with workflows, you can automate different tasks when something is pushed to GitHub, and the activation file is all we need for now. This is going to sound weird, but go ahead and move that template.yaml file somewhere outside your project's directory. The desktop is fine. The reason for this is if it was left without the Unity license number, GitHub still is going to try to process it, and it's going to throw an error. We'll come back to that here in a little bit. Go back over to your command prompt, and again, we're going to need a few commands, one line at a time. Note, you will still need to be at the same file path, so navigate back with CD and your project file path if you close the window. So go ahead and type git space status, and that's going to show you the empty Unity project that we created, as well as that .github file. Since they're in red, that's showing that we've made changes to them. Those are all the new things. Next, type git space add, and then the star. That's going to add all of those files into what we're going to add on GitHub. You might get something like that. That's okay. Now we're going to type git space commit hyphen m. That's going to let us add a message to this commit. And we're going to add empty Unity project and activation workflow. Go ahead and hit enter. It's going to add all those files. And the last thing we're going to want to do is git push origin main. Now remember, you're going to want to add whatever your branch was called. In my case, it's called main. And in just a moment, you'll see that little message showing you that everything was successful. And if we head back over to our browser and hit refresh, you'll notice that that first commit is now up on your repository. If we click this fourth tab, Actions, you're going to see the activation workflow we just created over here on the left-hand side where it says Get Unity License Activation File. Click on that workflow, and then here on the right side, click Run Workflow. Now, this process takes about a minute or two, so I'll fast forward a little bit. Once you see the action has completed, you'll see this Get Unity License Activation file pop up, as well as the green check mark showing that it was successful. And you can click the title in order to view details about that action. And this is also where we're going to find the activation file we need. So go ahead and scroll all the way down. And down here under Artifacts, click Manual Activation File, and that will download it to your computer. You can see mine just completed. I'm going to go ahead and minimize my browser and head back over to my Downloads folder. There's that manual activation file.zip right there. I'm going to go ahead and right click and extract it. And here is the unity.alf file that we need. Let's open our browser back up, and we're going to go to Unity's manual activation page, and I'll have the link for that in the description. Go ahead and sign into your Unity account. You should get this page, and here in the manual activation, the license request box, go ahead and hit Browse, and we're going to navigate to that .alf file that we just extracted, hit Open, and click Next. On this page, you're going to need to select some options about your version of Unity. For me, I'm using the personal edition, but not in any kind of professional capacity yet. So I'm going to go ahead and hit personal option and not in a professional capacity. Hit next. And go ahead and click this download license file finally. And you should see it pop up right there. And quick side note right here, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my desktop. I mentioned you only need to do this step one time. As long as you hang on to this .ulf file that we just downloaded right here, I'm going to go ahead and move that onto my desktop. As long as you hang on to that file, that's what's going to keep you from having to do all of that step again in the future. What I recommend doing is creating a new folder specifically called CI/CD template, and keep that somewhere where you keep all of your other game development project files. Then anytime you start a new project, you'll have it easily on hand. Now we're going to head back over to your GitHub repository, and we're going to go to the last tab this time, Settings. And over on the left-hand side, we're going to go down to Secrets and Variables and click Actions. Once this page is loaded, we're going to click the green New Repository Secret button. And we're going to name it Unity_license. And the template file that we're going to have here in a little bit is going to reference this secret using this name. So it has to be exact. Capital, all caps, Unity_license. And for secret, we're going to go into that ULF file that we just created, and you're going to copy the contents of that into your secrets tab and then hit add secrets. Now, this does have my license number in it, so I'm not going to show it in this tutorial, but you will want to copy the contents of it here. Now that we have your Unity license secret key, the next step is getting the secret key for itch.io as well. And fortunately, this step is much easier than getting the Unity license. And if you aren't deploying to itch.io, you can go ahead and skip this step. And there's one step later on in the template.yaml file that you can skip as well. So keep your eye out for that. Let's go ahead and open up our browser. And we're going to head over to, you'll want to go to your personal itch.io page and go to settings. Once you're on your account settings page, we're going to scroll down to this developer section and click API keys. Now, you may get this kind of security check requesting that you either log in or connect a GitHub account. Mine is already connected. I don't exactly remember the process here. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue anyway. And if you shouldn't see one of these yet, and if you don't, you're going to want to go ahead and click generate a new API key. And you can see a new one just showed up for me. I'm going to go ahead and revoke that one. I've already got mine. But once you have your API key here, you're going to go ahead and click view and copy the entire content. Now, since this is my API key, again, I'm not going to show this one, but you will want to hit view and copy the whole thing. And now we're going to go back over to our GitHub page and navigate over to our repository. Back over to our settings, down to secrets and variables and actions. And we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're going to hit new repository secret. And this time we want it to be itch underscore io underscore API underscore key. And again, it's going to want to be exactly like that. It's going to reference it in the template file later. And once you have that, go ahead and paste your secret into this field and hit add secret. Now, that's all we need for the action and secrets. Uh, Before we actually create the build action, we're going to need to go into the workflow permissions of this repository and just make a minor change. Without this, you're going to get an error every single time that GitHub tries to run the build. So since you're still here, let's in the settings, we're going to go to code and animation. I'm sorry, code and automation. Click on actions and general. Here you're going to find some different options for the workflow permissions. And what we're going to want to do under workflow permissions is go ahead and check read and write permissions, as well as the option that allows GitHub Action to create and approve pull requests. And then go ahead and hit save. And just as an aside, if you are creating a template for future use, kind of like I suggested, this is likely the piece that will cause you the most issues in the future. To my knowledge, you can't actually save these permissions to your GitHub account. They are repository specific. So you will need to check and make sure it's done every time. Now we're ready to create our build workflow. And this is going to be very similar to the activation.yaml file that we created earlier. So go ahead and go back to our desktop and our workflows folder. And now we can drag that template file back in. And go ahead and open it in Notepad, your favorite code editor. Oop, wrong screen. I'm going to go ahead and pull that over. It is not pulling over. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this in Notepad. There we go. There we go. So, what we're going to want to do is navigate down to this section here, deploy pages. Now, if you aren't deploying to itch.io, you can get rid of everything from there down. If you are putting it over on itch, go ahead and leave this section in here. And the only lines that we're going to want to adjust are these two at the very bottom, itch game and itch user. You're going to want to put your game name here, and I'm going to put mine as CICD demo, and username would be Brain Fart Studio. You're going to want to put your game name and your username there, and then go ahead and save that file. You can close it. And earlier I had you create this CI/CD template for future use. Since you've already set your username and the game name, you can just take that template file and copy it into our template. Now you can use this in the future, and the only line that you'll have to adjust is that game name. And the very last step that we need in order to set up CI/CD is to push this build workflow back up to our GitHub repository. So I'm going to go back over to our my command prompt, and we're going to use the same 3 lines that we did before, but we're going to change the commit message just slightly. And again, reminder, these are done 1 line at a time. So I'm going to do git add star. And I'm going to do git status real quick just to make sure, yes, that template file is ready to go. So I'm going to do git commit -m for message. I'm going to add build workflow. And then git push origin main. And again, you'll want your branch to be put here. And once you see that going, everything has been set up for CI/CD on your Unity project. So congratulations. What you're going to want to do is wait about 6 or 7 minutes. The time kind of depends on the complexity of your Unity project. And then afterwards, you should see a new build notification in your itch account, and the game should appear on the appropriate page. I am going to fast forward so what you can see what this looks like on your GitHub page as well as on the itch.io page. So we're about 11 minutes later, and if I click over to my GitHub page, you can see that that add build workflow has now been added. And if I click into that, the 2 different parts of the template file are now showing up. We've got the build for WebGL, which is going to be the Unity build itself. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, note kind of like before, we had artifacts under the activation YAML. Now we have artifacts showing the build, and in this case, the WebGL build. If we click this, it's going to download our actual Unity build. So if you're used to doing it manually, this is a good way to automate it. So if you want to have this available for clients or for other people you're working with, this is a great way to do it. And the second part, deployed to itch.io, you can see that's also been successful. And if I click over to my demo page and reload, you're going to get this loading first time. And if I run the project, you can see it's going to load that up for me. So we can see that our Unity project is now being built and deployed all the way to itch.io without us doing anything. And if you want to test this, you can go back into Unity, and we'll just create a simple square. And we're going to adjust our background color. Let's make it a lovely shade of dark purple. I don't know why, just feels good. We're going to save this and go back over to our command prompt, git add all, git commit, testing changes, and then git push origin and whatever your branch name is. Okay, that's now been pushed up to the repository. So in about 12 minutes, I should see that change reflect on both GitHub and itch.io without me having to build anything. We'll see if it works. Okay, so it's been about 7 or 8 minutes. And if I go over to my GitHub page, you can see that that latest commit that we made called testing changes has now completed. And if I click into it, and go back down to artifacts, that new WebGL build should now be here at the bottom. You can click and download that. Or in our case, since we're deploying to itch.io, if I come up here and refresh my itch.io page, shouldn't take too long, and run project, we should see those changes made with a purple background and our white square. And we do. So we know everything is now set up correctly. CI/CD is incredibly helpful, especially when you're working in teams or for clients. It saves so much development time by freeing up your own computer from those long build times. I set it up in the beginning of every project, and I encourage you to start doing the same. But I also know that learning how to do it is complicated, and I hope this tutorial helped. If it did, be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It would really help me out. This is also my first YouTube tutorial, so I'd appreciate any feedback on what you liked or didn't like. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching.